Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Commission Breath. Brandon Love here with Tom Moffat, and it's a milestone episode for us. It is number 50, numero 50 for us. So today we're going to do a little recap, a year in review, we'll call it, because we took a little Christmas break. So it's been a full year. And we're going to go over some of the things that have worked, some of the things that haven't worked, where we're headed, our mindset, and everything that way. So stick around because there's going to be some great takeaways for your mortgage business and also for growing in life in general.
Yeah, and why don't we start off with just talking about commission breath for a sec? I don't know about you, but it feels good. A whole year. I definitely didn't think we would starting out. Who knew we would be here a year later, kind of doing our thing here? But we've been enjoying it. And I still think there's a lot of gas left to put in the fire, and we've got some big plans with the podcast in general, even our YouTube channel. Like we want to grow the thing like crazy. So I'm excited. I think you feel the same way too, Brandon.
Yeah, we're fired up still. I think always with creating content, and a lot of you probably feel this with social media and different things like that, that you go through like an initial high where you're amped up and cranking out tons of stuff. And then you go through this period where you're like, crap, I don't really have an idea this week that's substantial enough. So there's definitely been periods of that where we've grinded through in terms of output, but the consistency's been there and we feel motivated by seeing the success of that and the growth of the show that way.
Yeah, you're never gonna feel fired up for every single episode, and there's definitely been some. Even the last month was definitely hard with everything going on in our life with our businesses and just getting busy in general. And it's easy just to push off an episode and say, "Hey, we'll just kind of sacrifice a podcast episode," whether it's Commission Breath or Canadian Mortgage Guide. But having the two of us, like breaking it down into those solo episodes, definitely helped us while we were going through that busier time. And another thing that really helped us that we haven't chatted about yet is the scorecard, or I don't know what we call it yet, but we created this Notion template. We like gamifying everything like we've talked about many times over, but we have this really cool system on Notion. It's kind of like a little CRM database just for us that we've created. And we have a point system for every non-negotiable we do, we get a point. So I think that's really helped us keep on track as well. And even just from a visual perspective, seeing what we have to do for the week, for the day, for the month, that's helped me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I'm super competitive, so I love having the Notion thing and hopping on. Sometimes I go in there and I'm like, crap, like Tom crushed me this week because I got bogged down in files or doing other shit. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna just like go crank out an episode. Saturday was a perfect example. I realized I hadn't done my CMG episode for the week, and I was sitting up at the cottage and my dad and brother had just left. Livia and my daughter were coming in, and I was like, okay, I've got an hour to myself. I could have a nap, I could go out back and have a beer, or I could just sit down, bang out this episode, and make sure Tom doesn't get a jump on me for the week. So it was nice, like to be motivated by that. And the point system is just a beautiful way to visually see that and to trigger the action.
Yeah, and I find if you weren't competing against someone else in it, like you can be as motivated as you want, but that motivation comes and goes. And I find that's what hurts people with their daily or weekly non-negotiables is the fact that if they're not feeling motivated that day, it's very easy to push it aside and be like, whatever, I'll start tomorrow. But having that accountability partner where you're competing against someone and maybe we don't even have anything on the line in terms of like prize, but we're just so competitive, we want to win. So I think like you could even do this if you're not merged in a business with someone. Like you can still pick a broker partner and have a shared Notion template where you're tracking your non-negotiables, and it doesn't have to be the same non-negotiables. You just kind of have the same amount of points per day, per week, per month. So I think that can be a cool concept that we can even do a full episode on and share our screen and go through what we've created, because it took a bit of time to create the point system.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And it is a good point. Like you can just compete with someone else. I know that like for us, for the year and a half or so leading up to us merging our business, I competed with Tom all the time. So Tom would roll something out and I'm like, oh shit, I'm gonna copy
Yeah.
that and I'm gonna roll it out. And vice versa. And we were very much like transparent on our funded volume and our files and everything that way. So we were kind of pacing with each other that way. And then we merged businesses and obviously a lot more collaboration there, which pulled away from having to duplicate tasks, which was nice there. But we, for a couple months, lost that element of competition with one another. Whereas now we have that full force. Like, I don't want Tom to fund more files than me in a month, and vice versa. And I don't want him to have a higher volume contributed to the team, and vice versa. So, this really forces us to stay competing against one another. And then that competition drives our business forward, which allows us to compete with bigger teams, bigger brokerages, et cetera. And it just always increases the level of compete we're bringing day to day, which I personally find motivating. I know for a lot of you, you might be thinking, "Hey, Brandon, I just want to make like my 100 to 150 a year and spend time with my family and be happy." That's great too. You can compete on efficiencies. You can compete on other things to dial in your system. It doesn't always have to be a funded volume or a file basis, but we find that works for us and our team.
Yeah, and that 100 to 150 used to be a lot easier to come by. Like with our comp now, with the 3-year fixed deals, you got to work a lot harder to get to that range. You got to double your closed files for the year. But speaking of closed files per month, you just hit a record, your personal record. So why don't we dive into that a bit? I know you spoke a bit about this on your last episode, but maybe we can dive a bit deeper as to like what your outputs were leading up to that moment and how you accomplished that big month of yours.
Yeah, so I touched on this on the last episode that I just kind of changed my frame of how I was talking to clients. So I realized that I was kind of sometimes getting involved in the conversations they were bringing up regarding rate and other things like that. And I just started talking more holistically on overall mortgage strategies, long term financial wealth, that kind of thing. And just really going back to the basics of being that support person for them and for their realtor partner. So I just did the things I used to do when I was like scrappy and broke, and I would text at night and I would take those evening calls. I would update people. I would work super fast. So I would get something and I would just have a budget turned around right away. And I really just like blew my customer service level that was already pretty good out of the water that way. And then I just shifted the lens on what I focused on with that customer service. So rather than being like, okay, here's your budget showing the rate, I showed, okay, here's your budget. Here's how we're going to pay down these other debts. Here's how we're going to set aside some money for investing. Here's how we're going to do these different things. And that really led to much happier clients, which stuck with me and closed. But it also had this unique thing where I got a lot of client to client referrals instead of just realtor and past client renewals, refinances, et cetera. It was like, hey, so and so in my
Interesting.
network is having a crappy experience. Can they reach out to you? I'm like, yeah, of course, always open to referrals.
Yeah, that was my lead up question was the fact that you service these clients, did it lead to more referrals from a client perspective? And it did. So that's beautiful. The second part to that too, again, I don't know if you mentioned this in the podcast, but you also did some more outputs with your realtor partners. And you just mentioned you were doing more texting and more follow-ups, but you went back to the old school approach of making just simply more calls. And that was like one of the big reasons why you got to that point.
Yeah, so I pulled a list of anyone who had ever sent me a lead, whether it funded or not, for the last 2 years, and I just started calling them again, and I just asked, "What's going on? How's your experience? We did some work together in the past. We had some success, or we didn't have some success. Who are you working with? What's working for you? What's not working for you?" And just kind of calling to see if I can help with anything. And then at the end, I mixed in some soft asks and some hard asks, just saying, "Hey, is there anyone you're working with that I can help, or anyone who you hear isn't getting the best service that I can offer a second opinion to?" And it just very old school, work the phone for an hour a day. It doesn't take much. And then just follow up on text, Friday video updates that way. And it worked really well.
Yeah, like going back to basics. I find ourselves always doing that, and it's what's most effective. Like just have that human touch, that human element, stay top of mind, and you do that with the phone calls. I think that's great. Instead of trying to like create this whole new innovative strategy, maybe you're trying to get more renewal business or refi or whatever the case is. Let's go back to basics. Let's see what worked in the past. Try that, and if it doesn't work, then we can maybe think outside the box and think of a whole new strategy to pursue.
For sure. And I think I looked at a few systems and strategies that I wanted to implement. And I was like, yeah, this is probably going to take me 10 hours to set up. Gonna have
Yeah.
to figure out a new tool, roll it out. In that time, I can make the calls that are going to lead to the 15 files a month kind of thing. And, that's good enough for me. I don't need to rebuild the whole ship. I just need to
Yeah.
double down on what works. And I think Ryan Wiley made a good point of this at the Strategy Hub event that brokers are very good at complicating their business and making it really difficult to stay on top of, when really it's the simple things that work. So calling your database, calling your realtor partners, making those little outreaches to show them that you're still present and you're still thinking about them has an outsized return than you would think.
Yeah, and I think like once you start scaling, like if you're like a say 300, 400 mil team, like Sure, maybe then you have some automation that you're weaving in because you have this big thing at scale. But like you just alluded to, like 15 files each a month, like we're happy with that. Like, I don't know, like we do want to keep growing and keep expanding, but with everything else we got going on, we're happy with that right now. And in the future, if we do want to expand to a 200, 300 mil team, whatever the case is, then maybe we have to explore these other avenues because there's only so much you and I can do by making our calls, more realtor partners, unless we hire and have more of a team approach underneath us, which of course you would have to do if you're scaling as well. So many different elements that you would have to consider in that. But I think as of right now, most brokers and agents listening to this podcast, I think going back to basics is going to be more relevant to them than anything else out there.
Exactly, and then you control the ebb and flow of your business that way. If you want to turn off for a week in the summer, you just don't make calls 2 weeks before. It's really that
Yeah,
easy. If you wanna get busy, make more calls. It's
exactly.
not rocket science that way. The biggest thing I find is that people don't feel comfortable making the call, so they just don't do it at all, and they'll crank out like 100 pieces of social content, which is great. They'll do all these strategies, which are awesome, but they're not doing the simple task, and the simple task is the foundation. You build on top of the foundation. You can't throw all the primo stuff on the ground and then try to build from there. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, and going back to that strategy piece, like it was a thought this morning actually I wanted to mention to you is like this year has been a year of rate shoppers and people just leaving brokers at the altar to go to RBC, CIBC, whoever the lender is or the bank outside of our channel. They're being super aggressive. So a lot of people are losing files left, right, and center. And it's just the nature of the year. Let's hope it doesn't continue trending in that direction. But if it does, like you do have to think outside the box and think of different strategies to include in your business to make it more sticky for your clients and can't just always lead with rate. Like that goes without saying. We talk about that all the time and other brokers out there talk about it as well. But like you also can't just talk about the mortgage features like, oh, this lender has a higher prepayment penalty. This one has higher prepayment privileges. Like you can't always win on that because at the end of the day, like rate, in my opinion, is like top one or two most important things with a mortgage. And I think like a lot of brokers are avoiding that and it's kind of like that thing that we all know, but everyone's trying to lead with these like prepayment penalties and stuff like that. And I think that's the wrong approach. I think you have to go a bit higher than that and focus in on a niche like the cash damming that strategy hubs teaching, reverse mortgage or real estate investors. And this morning, one client that I haven't had too many real estate investor clients over the past year just because of like how the market is, but I had a real estate investor that just bought a property a couple weeks ago, and it's so sticky. Like they're so pumped with like the process that we had for them. Like I did like tailored budgeting with their strategy in mind, and I know that client is not going anywhere. And it'd be really nice to have the majority of our clients like that. I mean, you could build your business out just focusing on real estate investors, but it would be nice if you carved out a little niche like that, and everyone is so much stickier. That was my thought this morning.
For sure. And I think that's 100% you could build on that in certain years. Right now, it's a little bit trickier, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean you ignore those pieces. But going back to your comment on rate being one of the top priorities to people, a simple way to determine what client you're working with is in your discovery call. Just say, okay, there's great rates, there's inferior products, or there's superior products with less great rates. There's different things we can bundle, like setting up a bank account that gets you the best rate. Why don't you rank what's most important to you? Is it a rate today, like monthly savings? Is it building your financial future? And have your client just share what's important to them. A lot of them will think it's rate, but then once they start to share on it, they're like, I want to have money set aside for my kids' tuition in the future. I want to be able to retire early. I want to pay my mortgage down so I don't have to think about it. And then those little pieces allow you to reframe the whole conversation around that, and rate becomes a secondary component of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like using the example of paying down the mortgage quicker. Of course, like one lender outside of our channel might have a 10% prepayment privilege, and ours, we can get them with 20%. That's a big difference because you're going to save a lot more interest with our lender by paying it down quicker versus the outside lender. But what I was trying to say is like all things considered equal, like there's some pretty good products outside of our channel that compete with what we have. And if they're pretty much the same and it's not making a difference for what their strategy is or what they want, and they just want that lower rate, like you were talking about, then it's hard to compete on that. And it's hard to argue. Like if your client's getting like a 499 with an outside bank outside of our channel, and we could only get like a 519, I'm just using an example. Like I don't even feel good trying to keep them and retain them if like we're not providing any extra value. And of course, we try to do as much as possible to provide that extra value. But if there's someone that just wants a mortgage, they have no aspirations of investing in the future or paying down their mortgage or whatever, then I don't know. I don't feel good trying to force someone into our ecosystem if they have such a better deal elsewhere.
Yeah, I think that's where you have to find opportunities and show them and do some more of an educational piece. And if they don't find value in that, then yeah, 100% go to the gold lion bank and get that rate. But if you find value in some of these strategies, then we're going to be the ones to guide you to that. Like they're not going to
Exactly.
be able to show you those opportunities. And I think that's a big piece. And there's a comment on selling that you can't sell if you don't believe in the product yourself. And I find this like when I have peaks and valleys in my mortgage business, and like I don't go to zero funded files or anything like that, but I have like months that I do really great. And then once in a while, I'll have a time where I'm not doing as well. And I realize it's because I kind of lose confidence and faith in what I'm selling because I start thinking, okay, well, so and so has such a better rate and the product's not that different. And kind of what you just alluded to there. And I always kind of refresh my mindset on this by saying, okay, what about the other needs of the client? What are the other things that I actually can't help out on? And Steve Diment had this great thing when I had him as a coach, and he said, have a book of your wins. And it's your clients that send you that amazing feedback. Hey, you helped change my family's life. You saved us from this really hard time. We couldn't have done this without you. We couldn't have gotten our first home. We were so anxious with our bank. And then you came in and just gave us the confidence we needed to do that. And have kind of your book of wins there, and in times where you feel discouraged or you feel like, I'm just another place to get a mortgage, this really reminds you that you do provide value and you do show clients a different way of thinking. It kind of gets your head out of that fog and allows you to surge forward towards actually hitting your goals and giving the level of service that you can. Because I know when I get in that kind of fog state, I'm less enthusiastic about working on a budget. I'm less enthusiastic about doing an application. Whereas when I refresh, wipe the windshields, kind of reset my trajectory, I'm full steam ahead again.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I think it's a fine line. It's like, you have those clients that they don't want anything else. They don't care about anything else except for just a lower payment. And that's what I was referring to. I would actually feel better myself personally if that's all they want and they already have this offer from another bank and they don't need everything else I have to offer, then I'll gladly let them take what they have. They're going to go there anyways. So I don't mean like get into a mindset of like, oh, I'm not worth anything. It's more so like, pick your battles. You're not going to win them all. And that's a great mindset to have for this year and possibly future years. You're not going to win them all. So don't beat yourself up over it.
100%. Okay, shifting trajectories there. One of the things we realized this year is that, with 60 basis points payments for a lot of 3-year fixed and things like that, you have to budget differently. And I touched on this in my last episode as well. And one of the ways that we figured this out is finding a lower cost option of where to actually run your business. So, what we switched to is building out what's going to be called Tango Ontario. And it's flat fee, low cost. And we know because we're 2 months in now, just on the cost savings and how much more we're earning just from this simple switch. So I think it's something if you're feeling like your brokerage is too expensive, sit down and do a comparison on some other options out there. It's not difficult to switch and it does save a lot of money if you find the right fit.
Especially if you're with one of those brokerages that take a percentage off the top, like 3 or 5%. Like when I joined my first brokerage, this is not Bricks, by the way, this is another brokerage. I didn't realize my splits weren't showing the house, the brokerage, what they were taking before the team that I was under was taking their split. So I was missing a full 5%. I was like, why are my pays so little? Like I know I'm not on like the greatest split because I'm newer, but I should get this. And I started like calculating. I'm like, where the heck is like 5% of this stuff? And then I realized it was from the house after talking to the team lead. I'm like, what the heck, man? I signed the contract and it stated it in there. So it wasn't like they were hiding it, but the paychecks never really represented it. So if you're newer or even if you're a seasoned broker, like a lot of people are still discovering this stuff after years of being with a brokerage. And I think it's worth taking the extra half hour or hour just to review your contract that you signed, your pay slips, and just tracking your money. And I talked about this on one of the last episodes. I'm not the greatest with tracking money. That's why I have you. You're Mr. Money Man. And I think like it is important though. If I didn't have you, I would definitely put my head down and be like, okay, like where's all this coming from? Like Am I getting charged the right split? Did the lender give me the right pay? It's super important because especially in times now where we're getting paid literally half the amount for the terms that we have, every dollar counts.
Exactly, and you don't know what you don't know. So you might think you have a great deal, and a lot of them are marketed as like these 95-5 splits, but then behind the scenes, there's the house getting paid out, or in certain cases, they're marketed as like 100% commission, but then there's file fees, additional fees for credit pulls, that kind of thing. So what we decided to build in partnership with Dean Larson and Jason Henneberry, and this is the Tango ecosystem that's kind of out west, and we're applying it to Ontario, is a flat fee model where you don't pay for credit pulls, you don't pay for VIP Club, you don't pay for Strategy Hub. It's all included in there. And 100% of the revenue from the lenders flows down to you based on
Yeah.
that. So you pay your flat fee and then the rest flows to you. And it's significantly more than what's been left on the table elsewhere. And so in hindsight, going through that and realizing that now, I'm like, wow, this really opened my eyes to a lot of opportunity that I know people are out there struggling when they're leaving money on the table and maybe don't realize it.
Yeah, the flat fee is a game changer. I'm pumped about it. We originally offered it to teams, team leads that had brokers and agents underneath them. Now it's open up to individual agents and brokers. So if you are a listener and you're curious about what the splits are, we can have a confidential chat. Just send us a DM on Instagram, and we can go over the split structure and also the flat fee model.
All right, that's enough about our mortgage book and our mortgage brokerage.
Don't worry, we won't pitch you anymore, guys.
Yeah, so that was my hard sell. Just kidding. I wanna jump into content quickly because obviously this is content, and we've talked about how these all haven't been hits, and a lot of what we put out on social media, YouTube, etcetera, it's not all hits, and that can be discouraging. So I found a stat today released by Noah Kagan. He's a beauty.
He's an author, right?
He's an author, serial entrepreneur. He started AppSumo. He was like one of the
Oh,
early
that's right.
employees at Facebook. He's basically an early investor in a lot of the Silicon Valley startups.
Millionaire Weekend guy?
The Millionaire Weekend guy. Yeah.
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 Okay.
So he shared Justin Bieber, 285 songs released, 85 of them were hits. So that's a 30% rate. Taylor Swift, 243 songs, 59 hits, 24%. Drake, 133 songs, 38 hits, 28%. So 73% of their output is not popular. And while I love all of Taylor Swift's songs, um,
You do
I,
he's not
I
lying, he does.
I do. I realize that this too is like a great mindset to have. Like all of these top performers, whether you like them or not, they're crushing it from a revenue perspective. They're not giving up when, you know, 73% of their stuff flops or doesn't have commercial success. They keep creating content. And a lot of us put out one podcast, one YouTube video, one thing on social media, or we get started for a week at a time, that kind of thing. And then we fall off and we're just like, we weren't getting any traction. Or you do 100 realtor meetings and you're like, I only got 20 realtor partners out of that. That's a fantastic conversion rate. And so a lot of what I'm just trying to say here is don't get discouraged and beat yourself up if you're not getting these outsized returns on your efforts. You don't know what's moving in the background and the things you can't see and when that hit is going to pop out. So you just have to keep creating content and keep rolling forward with forging ahead with new relationships and just keep pouring into your business.
Yeah, a couple things on that. So, I love that stat. That's pretty cool. And to add to that, like, so let's just use Bieber as an example. I think he was 30%, you said?
Yeah.
30% were hits. So that other 70%, those songs can speak most to his listeners versus those 30% hits. And I think that applies to us in our business. Like we might have a video that goes viral, but it's like surface level stuff that really doesn't hit deep with people and doesn't have them come out and reach out to us for a mortgage. I think the same goes for us. Like to give you an example of that, we talked about on one of the past episodes, we had a lead that reached out to us from one of our YouTube videos that has 11 views on it. And that is by no means a hit, like 11 fucking views. And this lady reached out to us. It's now a live deal set to close. And it was a small mortgage. Like we'll probably get 2 or 3K off it. But besides the point, that's from an 11 view video. And I think that you should look at that with your social media. If you're getting 100, 200 views, whatever the case is, all it takes is that one person. And with us having a high ticket product, mortgages, like we get paid quite a bit per mortgage. I think it's worth it. Just stick to it. I think that's a really good stat to put things into perspective. And I've definitely had highs and lows. Like we've had kind of a low period over the last month with our content on the mortgage side of things, with the amount of views we're getting, the amount of traction we're getting. It just kind of like fell flat for the last month. And it's pretty disappointing. But like we know YouTube takes time. So we're just going to keep putting in the reps. And I know a year from now, we'll at least be much further ahead than where we're at right now.
I like how you reframe that from like the 30% hits or whatever, and you looked at the other 70% because that's a really great point that those are the people that buy the swag at the concert. Those are the people that buy the concert
Yeah.
tickets, buy the 7 released vinyl versions of
They're the
the
true
album.
fans.
The true fans, the diehard fans, and that's the one that in our business, those are the fans that will send their family member to you. They'll do the renewal with you. So we do have outsized returns on the results we get. You don't need to have a 30% success rate. I think even if you're like 5 to 10%, you're doing very well and you're going to generate a lot of money for your family and for your business.
And as a byproduct, this will also make you more money, even if you're not getting those big hits on your videos. Your clients are watching, whether you know it or not. Like I'd say over the past couple of weeks, I've had maybe 2 or 3 clients mention our podcast. I don't even know if I mentioned this to you, Brandon, but they wanted to talk about some of the strategies we were already talking about in the podcast. I'm like, oh, you're a listener? Like, yeah, yeah, we've listened to like all the episodes. I thought that was pretty cool because that's going to definitely be more stickier for that client. So the more clients that listen to your content, watch your content, consume what you're putting out there, the stickier it is, and the more files you're going to close and less files lost.
Exactly. Just more eyeballs, more ears. It will eventually pay out. You just have to stick to the plan. So, quick recap, business is rocking and rolling. We're doing a lot to grow our personal book and apply strategies there to win more clients and retain them. On the brokerage side, obviously, that's growing in the background and something that I think a lot of you, if you're listening to this, are probably the right fit to join us. So, if you're curious, reach out. And then lastly, just keep creating, keep pouring into your business, whether it's meetings, whether it's content, whatever it is. Don't get discouraged by results that don't seem fantastic right away because they will compound and they will grow and you will absolutely crush it.
Absolutely. We should maybe create some sort of support network in the future for everyone that's feeling down about their content, but that's for another day. Just came to my mind.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.